Assalamu alaikum everyone, and I see that people have started joining in. So Alhamdulillah, uh, I see that we are almost close to reach 50 participants already. We'll wait for a couple of more minutes before we start the live session.
For 2 minutes. So.
Yeah, yesterday we have, conducted this session on remote on resume writing plus essentials of interview. So we have uploaded both the e-learning modules into your logins. Okay, so all the attendees, okay, from yesterday or for those of you who have joined today, okay, in the LMS now we have sessions from time management, stress management, emotional intelligence, resume writing skills plus essentials of interview. Okay, so assessment around resume writing will be uploaded shortly, but the e-learning modules are already uploaded. So please feel free to log in and then check. And the recordings will be uploaded in another 10 to 15 minutes. The recordings from yesterday and the day before yesterday sessions. Okay, so on the YouTube they have already been uploaded, but onto the LMS, okay, in the next 5-10 minutes it will get uploaded. Yeah. And there are a few questions around certification. The major criteria for earning the certification is attendance plus assessment. Okay, please make sure that you are enrolling into the course, taking the assessment for sure. Okay, assessment has to be taken 80% of the marks. Okay, you have to get it, only then you are considered to be passed. Okay, and there are other reference materials also. Okay, you may or may not take from the LMS based on your convenience, but the certification will be earned strictly based on attendance plus assessment. So please make sure everyone. Okay, channel on YouTube. Okay, so that's again, AMP channel, Association of Muslim Professionals. But then you can access all the recordings for this webinar program, okay, on the LMS itself in another 5 minutes or so.
Thank you so much.
I think Shah Sahab has come.
Saeed,
Okay.
Yeah, I see that Shah Sahab has come also.
Assalamu alaikum, Shah Sahab.
So I request
I'm ready.
Mera to
Assalamu
start the
alaikum,
session.
Walaikum
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, go.
Everyone, and welcome to the Employability and Soft Skills Program Day 8. This online training is organized by AMP in collaboration with Read Academy and Swift e-learning services, an opportunity to learn from home and develop new skills and improve your old ones. I would like to introduce you to the speaker of the day, Mr. Shah Siddiqui, who is the CEO of Read Academy, who will be taking the live session today. We also have Mr. Saeed, Director Technology at Swift e-learning services with us. So, Shah, we will continue with the session today now?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
Are we done with the LMS orientation?
Yes, Saeed Bhai spoke for a couple of minutes earlier.
Okay,
And
all right.
I will also give him an opportunity to speak if we have any queries at the end of the session, inshallah.
So I request you to talk for 2 minutes now.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is your instructor, Shah, and we would be continuing our journey after a break of 1 day from yesterday. I hope you had an enjoyable resume and job skills workshop yesterday. So for most of you who are continuing the session, we have our time, stress, and most importantly, the emotional module that we did on the recent trends. And with that in our mind, and with that, with those skills, we would now be getting into a very traditional module, which is an intro to HRM and so forth. So today we will journey into the traditional human resource management, and then we'll take a look at what is going on now in the field as opposed to in the past, and we will look at how we would make the best out of human resources management. It's a very broad topic, and I hope to cover and do as best as possible. And from what I have seen in the last few sessions, there were questions relating to, very intellectual questions relating to competencies and very specific technical questions. So I think those of you who were very, who are into these queries, who were, relating to your HR processes, I think we'll be able to cover some of those, if not all, that I may have missed. So I welcome you again to Human Resource Management. This is a very, general topic, and we'll take a look at its historical perspective and how, HRM, the field of HRM has gained popularity, has gained attention of many other cross, industry areas. And then it has how become, a system more valuable to the organizations in terms of their profitability, in terms of their sustainability. So HRM, or Human Resources Management, or human resources, the field of human resources, was a functional area, very limited, very confined. And then this started out as a department known as personnel department. This is what the name was in the past. If you can go back a few decades, you will see how, HR was confined to very specific, areas of business, within the field of, hiring and firing and paying them the money. Okay, this was a time when human resources were, a very, very general or generalist area where people would just get into HR if they didn't have any other choice. That's how it was. And it was mostly manual, where you will record the times manually, where you would record absenteeism manually, and then report to the individuals or to the superiors as to what the happenings are, and mostly paying cash. Even the executive management used to be get paid cash long, long ago. So this is what HR was, and how it evolved as businesses evolved, how it evolved into, a trend that became very, very in line, with the other functions of an organization. And most importantly, how it became strategic, incorporating all other divisions. And then most importantly, it became automated. In the recent past, we have seen, most of the newer developments, which are key in the areas of software development, align their aims or their goals, or one of their modules to be integrated with HR. So this was an evolution of HR, which came to be called as human resources or human resources management. With the advent of computer files, with the advent of databases, and with the advent of recording, the knowledge and the knowledge criteria, and as well as the processes, the business processes, HRM gained popularity, gained attention, and many other areas that we will talk about, including payroll, how payroll brought HRM into, into the front lines, okay, at the forefront of organizational settings. How payroll became very complicated and only HR could handle it and not the Department of Finance. How with these, deductions in the payroll, especially, in other countries in the West, they have a number of deductions from federal to state to unemployment and to compensation and to the social security contributions, and how calculation of all these, totaled, and improved the process of, net income. And there were ways of paying them the money bi-weekly versus monthly and whatnot. So basically HRM, became what it is now. And within HRM, there was a major, major revolution to emphasize on the human value, to emphasize on the human aspect, of HRM, and to call them a human capital, and to see them how resourceful they are, which meant that investing in, the HRM resources, and these resources related to employee, recruitment, employee training, learning and development, engagement, and all the way through, termination. So we all are familiar with these terms, and you would also be, surprised as how the HR field opened up and became ethical. So this is one area of HRM that talks about the ethics, or how to be in an ethically defensible position. If there is anybody to be more ethical in the workplace, it has to be the HR guy, okay? It is the human resources manager that needs to be, in a most ethically defensible position, which means that he has to be working with ethical HR. And then there are other areas too. So this turned out to be known as an area relating to the intellectual capital. And by intellectual, we once again mean our, social and, functional skills, the technical skills. So HRM evolved and was known as HCM. This is a newer term that you can call yourself as a HCM professional if you happen to be in the field of, HRM. So what does HCM relate to? It stands out for human capital management. Okay, so we're not only calling it, an area we deal with the intellectual capital, but we're also calling it human capital management. So it's more important, to see what human capital management, entails. This is very important, and this is what we would go forward, keeping an eye on the intellectual or the capital aspect of human resources. So the slides that you'll be seeing today are probably relating to an intro, will include some very traditional topics, okay? But you can imagine how humanistic this field is, or the word humanism is embedded throughout the HR processes. And not to confuse yourself, the goals of HRM remain the same. The objectives of any HRM professional remain the same. However, there are trends and there are deviations, okay? Anytime there is a deviation, any honest HRM professional is to be reminded, what his objectives are, how responsible he is, and his loyalty towards the employees, okay, to the workforce, not to the employer. Now, this has always been a major issue as to an HRM professional not being aware that his loyalty is expected from the employees, okay? So the employees expect his loyalty, not the employers, okay? Of course, his job is, given to him by the employers, by the owners. However, it's an ethical term, and it's a very crucial way of looking at HRM. But back to HCM, we would like to take a look at what HCM stands for and what it in actuality means. So human capital management is all about, the abilities of a human being, how he can interact with groups, okay, at a personal level. For a HR manager to come out of his specific HR role, it's very important that he looks at it as a HCM professional, Now with HCM, we mean that the HR processes are now in accordance or aligned with the business strategy, okay? So now there is an interaction with other departments in the areas of, strategic attainments, in the areas of functional goals, in the areas of tactical goals, in the areas of strategic goals, and as well as in the areas of unit goals, okay? So all the way from strategic to unit is where the HR is involved now, the HR professional. So we call it HCM. And the major difference was in the past, an HR professional would only gather data, okay? We'll look at it and we'll forward it. That's all his job was. Now, with the HCM, we're not only talking about the policy, we're not only talking about how the HR professional is analyzing the data, but we're going a step further. We're trying to understand how, the human capital can be improved, how it can be sensitive, to the recordings of the organization, how it can be playing a role towards the achievements of long-term goals, how it is important for an employee to be emotionally involved with an organization as opposed to just working for the organization. So these are the newer factors, and it seems that these are the factors that are, to be recorded, analyzed, and projected so that the organization meets its goals. This is the most important thing. For any mishap to happen, for anything relating to safety, for any, trends that will take the organization down, it is the human touch that we need. And if you ask me, there are many areas of businesses that don't do well that can be solved by the right approach to HR. Okay, so it's once again called a strategic approach to HR. And this is only done through HCM. So an HCM professional is not only gathering data. For example, if you're looking at the number of absenteeism, number of people who are absent as to why, and then, but taking a look at these absenteeism, analyzing the trend, looking at the data, looking at the cause and effects, the causation theory, okay, and what can be done. For example, if there is absenteeism, a high number of, or an increase in absenteeism on Monday, then you have to analyze why this is happening on Mondays, okay? And if there is absenteeism relating to payroll, you would have to analyze it. So this is how the trends were read, and this is what was done by HCM, because it was mostly relating to the human capital, okay? And when it comes to human capital, it was known that it was based on the research, it turned out that the human capital is the best source of sustained competitive advantage. So for an organization trying to seek edge, or trying to have a niche in the market, it was only the human capital. And how was it? Was also predicted by the human capital, or the new trend, in human resources. They could tell how a person could be a social capital, and how an individual could be an intellectual capital, and how an organizational pool or its database can comprise of individual capital. Okay, so by individual capital, what mean is their skills, their capabilities, okay, and their abilities. How can these be recorded? Okay, an organization is supposed to have an advantage, okay, and this advantage was based on the human processes advantage, as well as the human capital advantage. All these put together turned out to give a better advantage to the organization. So these resources are supposed to be having a pool of talent, or these organizations or these resources, as a result of the investment into HCM, turns out to be a very strong pool of talent management, a very pool that you can bank on. And these pool relates to the years of experience, to the skills that they have learned, and the abilities that have been, given to them. And of course, the tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge relates to relate to their cognitive abilities, how they came up with such traits. Now, all these recordings, all these talents are pooled into a database which gets recorded. So once an organization has a database full of knowledge, okay, or the processes that are going on, that are being held in a business, that's how it gets a human process advantage, okay, or an organizational advantage. Along with this, there are resources, okay, and these resources are unique. That relates to, once again, the human capital. And unique in the sense there should be rare. If there is the rare talent, an organization will grab it. Obviously, rare talents are not, common, are not readily available. So an organizational, resource will look for rare talents. And these rare talents could be relating to a human capital, could be relating to a product, okay, that they have devised. In addition to being rare, it has to be non-substitutable, which means that it cannot be substituted easily. That's what makes an organization very strong, or have a grip on its processes and advantages. And it has to be non-imitable, which means that it cannot be imitated. So these are the ways that human processes, or the human capital management, will look into its pool of talent, how to make this rare, non-substitutable, and non-imitatable. And with this, they move forward. Sometimes the organizations have a unique resource that is very rare, that's very valuable, that's very difficult to find, or that's very, very profitable in the market, okay? And these resources are a part of the resource-based theory. But not every organization is, strong enough, or, capable enough to have a strong, non-immutable, non-substitutable rare resource. For example, if you look at Apple, okay, it's one of the top companies in the world, and you realize how it came up. We'll try to look at the differences between Microsoft and Apple. But however, the product is now unique. It cannot be, copied, or the market share cannot be replicated. So, this obviously has a very strong, this company has a very strong human capital department. It knows how to treat people. Anyone in the world would like to be, on the books of Apple. From a small outlet, anywhere in the world, you'll see the unique features, how the human capital is, emphasize, how the capabilities and skills are advertised. This was a result of the newer trend, HCM. Of course, the past profitability counts. Okay. Another company that I want to talk about that is probably stronger than Apple when it comes to its resources is Aramco. Everyone knows Aramco, the oil drilling giant in the eastern province in Saudi Arabia, close to Dammam. So what's so big about Aramco? If you look at its human capital management, it functions very effectively. The profitability is high. Their gross revenues are about $1 billion per day. Okay, no better than Apple, in other words, or better than other companies like Apple combined together. And then what did they have? They had a resource, okay, an asset, which was obviously very non-immutable and non-substitutable. We all know that asset. And then the most importantly, this asset was free for them. So the cost of doing goods was nothing compared to, their gross profits and net profits. So everything that the organization made had reinvested in their human capital. This is the key for a successful organization. How the money was, or, assets or resources in abundance, or the profits in abundance were invested in human capital, which they even do today. So this is how human resource capital evolved. This is like not just, trying to, keep the employees happy, but this is, everywhere, in every level, at every organization, trying to have a purpose. Okay, this you can call it as purposeful management, and how the business strategies are incorporated into the HR system, how HR works in accordance to every strategy at every level within an organization, how managers are used to taking their information a step further and bringing about trends, and how the organizations are, progressing, with the human capital, and how the organizations pay importance to the capital itself, which is the intellectual capital, how they make their employees, gain knowledge, learning and development, retention, and succession planning, succession planning, which is how to see where this employee today will be tomorrow, and how to promote him to a better position. Okay, when it comes to succession planning, you have to even be able to replace the position of your top executive. How top executives will, intermingle, how will they interact with each other and improve their cross-functional abilities, their cross-functional skills. So this is, more of a strategic HR. This is how we can do, to improve the processes, to improve the human capital. And of course, the recruitment is a very, very, intelligent process. With all the new techniques, with all the new researchers available and the interviewing technique, we're able to pull the best talent out of the marketplace. Okay, there is a way, a very aggressive way, non-conventional way of recruitment known as guerrilla recruitment. You may have heard about it. Companies like Google were involved in it, where you will see an ad for, something very, valuable, profitable, on a street, on a public place, where you will have to call a number. And from there, you're given another number. From there, it goes on until you land up with a personnel who will be talking about a position that he's willing to offer. So there are very, very creative and very, very, different trends, in HR that they are adapting. And of course, we have the software, which is a key to any efficient management of operations within an organization. And you have seen the most popular, HRM packages have been devised, have been developed, and most of them relates to human capital. Okay. For example, the human resources module by SAP is one of the most profitable, one of the most efficient, one of the most, well integrated and very, very, diversified application. And you all know the value of being a SAP, functional guy, and how much he has to learn and the training. And all these were processes evolved by top-notch companies, how to improve the human capital management. So this is, a brief on the recent happenings into the world of HR, okay, from personal department to HR and from HR to HCM. So anybody who is interested in building on, HR path into your career or anyone who's interested in exploring HR, this is the way to go. And this is to broaden your perspective. This is how you would broaden your skills and try to be a genuine HR professional. And in this, we will try to look at how the boundaries of HR are, looked upon. And within the boundaries, we have areas, or closer to the boundaries, we have areas of outsourcing. So is it worth for an HR position to be outsourced? Okay. And then we know that knowledge-based systems are relying on technological trends, globalization. So is it worth it for the HR professionals to be in line with global trends? Okay. And then it goes on into a recent trend or a recent advancement in HR where they are trying to base it on competencies. Okay. And we talked about a bit of competencies, not because we were getting ready to get into HR, but we are talking about soft skills. This is a soft skills, based employability session where we talk about only soft skills. And these soft skills are nothing but relating to your HR capabilities, HR skills, how the HR relies on these soft skills. Okay. So with this in mind, let's move on. And I will try to share some screen and we'll try to do as many topics as possible between now and tomorrow. We take a look at the basic HR and move on to strategic HR. And we'll try to look at some motivational theories. We'll try to look at ethical HR, within the boundaries, as well as outsourcing in the areas of HR. And towards the end, we'll tomorrow look at also the competency-based HRM system, which is a newer field, which is gaining very much popularity. And I have information that I can convey to you, but of course it's a major part of HR now, beyond the scope of this session that we have today and tomorrow. However, we'll be able to relate to what is going on, especially based on our previous background on the areas of soft skills. All right, let me start out with sharing the screen. Host disabled. Ms. Shancharge, Ms. Shahzad, let me share the screen.
Yeah, you will be able to.
I'm not seeing my slides. Let me close and start again.
All right.
All right, I have it now.
Yeah, your slides are visible.
Okay, great.
Thank
So
you.
let's get started. All right, we talked about the basic stuff, relating to how HR evolved. And here, this is only to understand how, HR in your organization functions, how your HR manager has moved up from his basic role of a HR position into, the other aspects of the business, how he incorporates the other aspects of business. Our objectives is to take a look at, HR, be an advocate, identify areas of development. Now, this is a very wide field, and then the concept of HR is based on the term human, okay? So you are, as you move along, be a humanist, take a humanistic approach, call in humanism, and see how you can be in a ethically defensible position. All right, HR of today. This is once again, the HR of the past, you can say, because we're not up to HCM now. at least in this level. In this workshop, or in the first part of the slide that you will see, you would probably not be relating to anywhere, what the newer trends are. But I've already told you, we already talked about it, and we'll try to build on those based on whatever is available today. As a practice, you all, I'm guessing, have your writing journal, because we would have to record everything in there. And as a pre-assignment, I would like for you all to think of a manager that you have worked in the past. And this is actually very, important area in your career, where we always are impressed with managers. So think of a manager, the best manager that you have ever worked with, whatever his qualities were, starting from his, etiquettes, his behavior, his physical appearance, and his, style of managing. Okay. Think of it, and try to make a note of it and see, how you could, learn from him, or how you could, expand on his skills. And with our knowledge, as we move on, learning the newer topics that you see, you will try to relate the topics that you have learned, the newer topics that were already, seen in him. And then how you would expand on this when you are in his shoes, when you are in a manager. So if you were to be a manager, how would you interview people? How would you deal with your morning reports? How would you deal with, the way he would come and, assign you tasks? He would help you out, or he would appreciate your working. So this is your pre-assignment task. We always try to give you pre-assignments, okay? Although it's better done in a live interactive session, so I can review it and then, learn from it. However, it's your responsibility to try to practice those in your free time. All right, let's take a look at this video.
Dylan and Tatiana were discussing ways to introduce better human resource management practices into their company. Dylan was relatively new to the department and was overwrought by the process, but Tatiana suggested they consider some recent HR trends to help them come up with ideas for the process. Dylan agreed and was eager to learn more about the field, and discussed onboarding with his colleague, who explained that it was a new process of bringing people into the company. They debated the efficacy of proactive recruiting and whether starting the recruitment process early might advance the future of the company. Together, they laid out a plan for implementing the new trends and were excited to meet with the owner of the company and reveal their solutions the next day.
All right, so here is a good sum up to the processes that an HR manager had. What did he have? He only had recruitment, how to recruit people. And he only was worried about them coming to work, okay? And he was only worried about paying them the salary. That was his specific job. So this was what, HR was, or as per the slide, this is what HR is today, but we'll take a look at how, it evolved. All right. So here we have, the major areas: recruitment, employee engagement, retention, OD, and training. Okay. We have added some newer fields, okay, today. It relates to selection, okay. It within recruitment, it relates to the employee interviewing techniques, okay. And we have a major organization area, which is learning and development, which we're a part of it, okay. So it's called training. And then we have further, as we go on, succession planning and talent management and so forth. So key factors influencing HR today, I'm sure you all will agree to it. One is technology, globalization, demographics, contingent workforce. Technology, we can't appreciate it enough. We're here today because of technology. And we're here today, because of, the tools that we have, okay? When it comes to globalization, it was only for products that, globalization was important. With the advent of mass production, and warehouse techniques, globalization became, phenomenal innovation. However, when it comes to human resources, we have a global talent these days, and there are organizations who would hire, regardless of wherever you are in the world. There was a time when people thought that they would only apply for a local organization, a local company, and that was a fact. And there was a time when people thought that, well, you can apply anywhere throughout, the region or the country you live in, and that was happening. But we didn't see this, happenings until, a decade or so ago, or 2 decades ago, when the IT industry was booming. With the advent of the IT boom, everything was possible. Not just the technology, but the human talent that was scarce, a resourceful, that was recruited from all over the world. Okay, there are organizations that will recruit you for senior positions regardless of wherever you are in the world. And contingent workforce relates to the workforce for specific areas, sometimes young and old. It seems that even the retired personnel are being the most valuable workforce in many areas of business. So it goes on like this. And the growth in human resources management was due to onboarding, okay, techniques, proactive recruiting, focus on work-life balance, and sustainable improvement. So HR going towards HCM was based on these reasons. Onboarding techniques doesn't apply to every organization. It's supposed to, but it doesn't. If you look at the onboarding techniques at a company like Google, it would be, a system by itself and nowhere close to the onboarding techniques of smaller organizations. The business world is full of smaller enterprises, smaller businesses, smaller organizations, as opposed to established organizations. So with this, the onboarding technique, matters. Of course, if you're in a bigger organization, you have onboarding technique, which are way sophisticated, where you will only be going through different departments and training for a month. So you don't know where you are for a month, but it will all recall when you move up, okay? And very, very aggressive, proactive recruiting techniques. Example is guerrilla technique, check that out. And, your personal life is also important, is what the personal managers are now talking about, okay? In the past, your work life was more important, okay? But in many areas of business, you still see that people work, 10 hours a day, 6.5 days a week, okay? This is gonna, mess up your work-life balance. And if your work-life balance is down, there is no way your performance, productivity would be up. This will impact the organization, in not achieving its objective. So the HR managers are aware of this. How much they apply towards your personal work-life balance is what you have to be, concerned about. If the HR is not doing it, you have to bring it up because this is your right. And many times it's a violation. It's a major, violation for you to work more than 40 hours a week, to have your work life not have a balance, okay, and so forth. And of course, this is all towards sustainable development. You should be in a better off position, the organization, and you should be in a win-win situation. And so is, the prospects of the world. In some, we can say sustainable development. And then there are all kinds of techniques, to work it out, from, the newer certifications, the tools, personal development, seminars, online courses, sessions like, project management, risk, and Six Sigma, and so
Dylan and
forth.
Tatiana were discussing ways to introduce better human resource management practices into their company. Dylan was relatively new to the department and was overwrought by the process, but Tatiana suggested they consider some recent HR trends to help them come up with ideas for the process. Dylan agreed and was eager to learn more about the field and discussed onboarding with his colleague, who explained that it was a new process of bringing people into the company. They debated the efficacy of proactive recruiting and whether starting the recruitment process early might advance the future of the company. Together, they laid out a plan for implementing the new trends and were excited to meet with the owner of the company and reveal their solutions the next day.
All right, so why is onboarding important for the employees? It's because the employees feel like at home. Okay. In smaller organizations, you get to have a free lunch. Well, they'll say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but there is only on your first day. And most importantly, you get to have tea or coffee with the owner of the company. If it's a really big company, it makes you feel better. Okay. It's an inspiration, to meet with the top guys on the first day, especially on a multinational, if it's a multinational giant. So onboarding is what, is how the employees feel motivated and their morale is up.
Dylan and Tatiana.
Okay, I'm going to skip the questions. And let's start with recruitment and interviewing. Okay. So you all know how important recruitment is. This is the step. This is the initial step prior to onboarding. We talked about onboarding. And then recruitment is a very lengthy process. It goes on, depending on the organization. Okay. And the interviewer is tasked with a very, very smart job of getting the right people in. I mean, I'm sure you all agree to it. And how does he do it? He can just go by your physical, appearances, your skills. And then we talked about how he's missing on the traits, the personal attributes that you have. Okay, the knowledge that's hidden within the water is what actually predicts how good you'll be at the job. Okay, and your emotional, intelligence, how you would react in sensitive situations. So we already talked about this, and if the interviewer is incorporating these techniques, then his interview turns out to be, a successful interview in the sense that he will be hiring the right people, because the loss of human capital is a loss to the organization. And after a year, if you realize that the employee is a misfit, then all the efforts have been wasted. So this is how important, the recruitment is and the interviewing techniques. And then the process of keeping the employees is retention. Okay. Now this is often, misinterpreted, because retention is in the interest of the organization. When an employee is willing to leave, or if he's planning to leave, the employer should do his best to retain the talent, because it is a talent that grew up with him for a while. Okay. So there are aggressive retention techniques. And, I don't know if this will focus on it, but there are as aggressive as possible to retain the talent, because it seems that once the talent is retained, he doesn't leave. And there is a saying, once the person is gone, then, he's gone. There is no need for him to come back, although he may want to come back in the future. But, efforts are put in just to retain the talent. Okay. And for retention, you will start out with an interview, and you will start out about asking the reasons. If it's relating to family, we'll try to work on that. We go as far as, recruiting or giving a position to the spouse, and or, trying to meet, or match the price that he's, offered at the other position, or whatever the reasons are. So retention is a process where many organizations think that retention is a way, to hire some new talent, or especially in areas where, the employees or the individuals are discriminated. They may not work on, the talent, retaining the talent. But this is most important for the organization, as an amount of time and efforts have been invested in the recruitment process. the job selection process. Okay. The job selection process is, a very systematic, step approach that you can see on here. Job analysis, recruitment, filtering candidates, selecting, introduce, and retain. This was the traditional stuff, the way it used to be. But now what we can do is add a few, processes to each and see how the human selection processes are, visualized. For example, job analysis, we have job profiles now, okay? And we have job descriptions now. This is all a derivation of job analysis. A JD is a job description that talks about everything, okay? Which is good and bad, and I'll tell you why it's bad. And job profile talks about the role, the functional aspect of it. Now, if you just look at these two derivations from job analysis, this will talk about how an employee is being treated, how an employee, is expected, and how an employee works out in his position. Now, you have to know that with job analysis, there was not much you could do, but with job description, okay, in that there are competencies attached to these, job description as to what he needs to be, whether he needs to be a team player, whether he needs to be, sensitive person on the other side, whether he needs to have business acumen. These are all competencies that are attached to the job description. But this is how job analysis has been widened, okay? So job analysis has job description within which there is a cluster of competencies that is expected of the individual in the position. And attached to each competency is a list of indicators of his behavior, what he's expected. So if it's the job of a salesperson, okay, and then the position is job sales manager, and the competencies under job sales manager would be teamwork, working with others, and interpersonal skills, communication skills. And to each of these competencies, for example, teamwork, there are indicators which are known as levels of indicators. First level, second, third, and fourth. It's a multi-level competency. And to each of these competencies, the level will say, for example, go out and recruit, vendors. And then the other indicator would be to solicit new distributor, something like this. So if a person is doing this, then he is able to handle the job description of a sales manager. But once his skills reach the level 2, which is to meet with the area managers, and so forth, then he is likely to be promoted based on his level of competency, which is attached to the job description as a part of the competency framework. So this is just an example that I explain as to how, the process of job analysis has been widened. And this is as a result of the HCM process, okay? Same is the case with recruitment techniques, okay? We know about how different, ways the businesses recruit their employees. I'm not gonna go in detail. And then they have their own ways of filtering candidates. In interviews, we have a new technique called psychometric training. These are psychiatric or psychological ways of accessing an individual's, capabilities in very specific and unique scenarios. So we talked a lot about this in emotional intelligence, and I'm sure you all can recall. So selection process, onboarding, and retaining. So we will move on. Get good at interviewing. This is, for the interviewer, to prepare for the position, okay, and to ask him, and also to have control. This also applies to interviewee who would have to know about the company that's interviewing and so forth, which we may have learned in yesterday's session. I'm gonna skip the interviewing part.
Elizabeth was having trouble understanding the interview process and had asked Isaac for help prior to the series of interviews she would have to conduct the next day. He was the lead of the HR department and had experience in recruiting and interviewing employees and suggested they review techniques for interviewing fairly. Elizabeth agreed and was pleased when he explained that certain body language cues may interfere with the interviewer's interpretation of what was said, and that ethnic favoritism should be avoided. Isaac pointed out that Elizabeth should try to avoid bias when interviewing potential candidates and should focus on what was said and avoid comparing candidates with each other. Elizabeth used the technique she had learned the next day and was happy when she hired the candidate most suitable for the position.
All right, retention and orientation. If you look at here, retention is right after orientation, although retention may not be required for a long time, but it is a part of orientation. And how would you retain an employee? What if the employee is happy? Do you still want to retain him? Yes. What if the employee is not happy, that he would want to leave the company, but you would still need to work hard on retaining him? So let's look at how, let's look at how retention is looked upon for a person who's already happy. How would you retain an employee who's already retained? Okay, you would keep him, invested, or you would keep him, on an exponential curve by investing in his assets. Okay, by building on his skill, by having a chance, an opportunity, for him to be on a learning curve. So this is through learning and development. There are many quotes and faces about how important learning and development is. So we can't emphasize enough as we're doing it, okay? So the best thing that an employer or a small business or a well-established organization can do is invest in its employees, okay? Now there was a joke that circulated around, what if you invest in him and he leaves, okay? And then, this is not to be looked at, in that manner, but investment, is like any other investment in your employee. And then this only promotes your organization at a different level. Getting off on the right track. Okay, this is after onboarding. Look at it. It talks about paperwork. And there are different management programs. Employee engagement is a very hot topic these days. And then it relates to having a functional team versus as a disengaged, employee. So engaging employees is a very, very, sophisticated topic that came up recently. Dale Carnegie has very excellent programs on engaging, keeping employees engaged. Is it important? What does it mean? How do we keep a workforce engaged? These are based on your L&D and training techniques within our organization. And there is a department that keeps you engaged, okay? There is a department that invests in you, how he can offer you specialized trainings, how the employee can be equipped with, technical stuff as far as getting a college degree. As you may all know, most employers in the West offer at least a 50% to 75% tuition waiver towards seeking a degree at a university. So almost all employees of Motorola in 5 to 10 years will get an MBA if they don't already have one. And if they are motivated, they can very easily get a PhD while working, while getting paid, and having the tuition paid. There are many universities just relying on big corporations. So every big corporation or almost every organization will give you a chance to pursue your advanced degrees, while you're working. And of course, the universities offer, evening classes. So if you couldn't get a master's degree of it halfway done, get a job and they will pay for it. Okay. And believe me, the employer will never ask you when you're leaving, how come you got an advanced degree from us, with our money and you're leaving us. So that's not a question to be asked. Okay. But you can look at how responsible or how ethical an HR department is when it comes to engaging its employees and giving them the prospects that they need for future development.
Jessup and Nandi were working on a new orientation program for hired employees and were struggling to define what a good orientation program would require, and they understood that orientation was a necessity for a productive working environment. Jessup suggested they take a look at some effective orientation programs and identify their characteristics. Nandi agreed and pointed out that most orientation programs incorporated technical and social aspects of the job, as well as placed the manager in charge of the success of the orientation program. Jessup included that orientation programs should provide the correct type of training and that employees should receive introductions to other members of the company. Nandi and Jessup used these guidelines to create an orientation program which would help their new employees accustom themselves to the company and produce their best work. They were excited when it was put into practice and benefited those involved.
All right, so that was about orientation. You cannot expect an employee to come and work without being introduced to the job. You need more than a day for orientation, and for him to get used to the job, you need more than a month. But the important thing here is to make sure that you do not discriminate employees when it comes to orientation. You are fair with every other employee so that he doesn't have the feeling of having a biased employer on day one. This is very important. There is a quote here by George Bernard Shaw. Normally I wouldn't highlight it, but I saw the name, so I thought I would highlight it. Look at it if you can read it. It's in fine print. Okay. So this quote is connected with epistemology, the knowledge of knowing. Okay. This is for you to ponder why he said that. All right, so the next topic is following up with new employees, okay? And here, this will focus on once the employee is onboarded, how would you follow up? All right, you have to check in as a new manager. You have a group of new recruits, call it group of young enthusiasts, soldiers, okay, and you have to show them the commitment. You have to show them that you are there for them, you are there to work for them, and then we are interested in developing you. Some formal procedures following up, orientation checklist, informal or formal engagement with employees. You go through your checklist and complete the task, after which you're done with your process. I'm sure you all have gone through the checklist for your employees, okay, when you have a new recruit and how to keep him engaged. And the more interest you show, the better you are, okay. The warm personality is what is in question here when it comes to onboarding a group of new recruits or new graduates. You design it the way your company would want. Each day of the first week, every 2 weeks of the first 3 months, temper, approach accordingly. So here your cognitive skills and your self-management, self-regulation, self-control is in the play.
Pablo, Karen, and Ling were designing a follow-up schedule for the new employees who had participated in orientation the previous week. The boardroom desk was piled high with papers and stacked with pens, but they didn't have any ideas until Pablo decided they should work together and talk about key things to focus on for the schedule. Both Karen and Ling agreed, and they each wrote down an aspect they thought was important. The employee should meet with them the first day of each week. The employee should discuss how they feel about the workplace, and the employee should meet with them every 2 weeks for the first 3 months and monthly thereafter. Pablo, Karen, and Ling managed to finish up early and lay out a successful follow-up schedule with these aspects in place. All three of them were happy to have completed the schedule, which would make their jobs easier in the future.
So if you're a new employee, you have your own task list. And if you're the manager who have recruited new employees, new recruits, make sure that you have checked off your task list on the time. Time management. Workplace health and safety. Okay. These are basically guidelines from statutory or state or your central federal, laws. And a manager, an HR manager spends, half of his time working on the job and half of the time understanding, compensation laws, safety and hazard, okay, occupational hazards, and so forth. This is a separate topic, but you are, as an employee, to make sure that your environment is safe. And as a manager, you have to be in compliance with everything, especially for manufacturing facilities, okay? And there are, from the manufacturing facilities, very strong regulatory, checkups, very fine regulatory, fines, and very fine regulatory, disciplinary actions. Once in a while, I get a opportunity to go visit these manufacturing facilities where suddenly they have been instructed by the municipalities, by the federal health hazard societies. The famous one in the US is OSHA, where they will, come and check. And then talking about the safety for your employees, like wearing the helmet, the first aid, procedures and so forth are often to be, trained, given to your employees. So here the manager only needs to be knowledgeable about the compliance issues, the safety and hazard issues, whatever your governmental requirements are. So it's the manager's responsibility. Local regulations benefits workmen's compensation. This is a big deal, very important area for you to have, especially if you're working, in the Western countries, in Europe, North America. Because if an employee just falls down because of slippery, then he's most likely to sue your organization. And the more the complaints, the higher will be your liability insurance, higher would be the insurance you would pay towards workmen's compensation. So basically, understanding local rules. And the managers need to be trained about occupational health and safety, hazard control, and fire safety procedures.
Josephine and Harold were worried about the lack of training for occupational health and safety legislation for managers within their company and had been working on a new regime to train them with regards to this. They were stuck on ideas for which fields managers should be trained in to agree with current legislation in their state until Harold suggested they research and define those criteria. Josephine agreed, and together they discovered that their managers would need training in working with occupational health and safety legislation, incident investigation skills, fundamentals of inspection and hazard assessment and control. Josephine and Harold were happy they clarified their needs and immediately began implementing training schedules for those areas by consulting with health and safety staff within their organization.
All right, the next short topic is workplace harassment. You all know how important this is. This is once again falls on the shoulders of the employers, the managers. And this is, a topic that has always been ongoing. And if you were to ask in this crisis, yes, we hear about stories how people are being harassed, even in the crisis that we're going through, where most of us are, working, out of home. So there is, always, this aspect of business that is very, very detrimental to our society, to the workplace, strategies, and towards the organizational, achievements. And of course, this is, a big expense to most employers, to a lot of employers. And it also varies from country to country and from, um, laws to different laws, and how sensitive this area is, and how finely or how broadly harassment is defined. Okay, but this is a common problem regardless of where you are, whatever or how strong the laws are. There is always harassment. Okay, it starts with basically, bullying and you know physical, okay, and violence, and especially people who are, you know um, are already in the stress mode that we talked about, the acute stress, or people who suffer from post-traumatic disorder relating to something very frightening, or very, you know very you know threatening abuses from their past. Okay, so those people who are very, very vulnerable to any small intimidation or any small, verbal threat, you know is a part of harassment that is, a major threat towards the organizational achievements. Many organizations even how have their policies relating to harassment, okay, as zero tolerance on their strategic documents, which means that on their mission and vision, on the mission, some organizations have it. So it's how, important it is, and how, organizations ignore the fact that harassment, is an important aspect of organization. But a learning organization, an intellectual organization, and a smart organization will never ignore this, as it is a big cost. Okay, take a look at the cost to the organization. The turnover is very high. People come and go. Productivity is down. Employee morale is down. Absenteeism, and the legal cost is the most expensive aspect of this, detrimental effect to the organization. And of course, you lose the reputation. Many big organizations, many Japanese organizations with a different culture have had pay millions of dollars in compensation costs to the employees as a result of the harassment in many of their facilities. Okay, many of their facilities, and millions of dollars, have gone towards, trying to fix the harassment part. So how would a manager do that? Well, it's only the manager whose responsibility is to deal with this crisis within his unit. And as it goes beyond his authority, then he would relate to the higher authorities. But as long as a manager can empower his staff, okay, and lead by example, which means that he would have to have the staff encourage for anything, relating to deviations, anything relating to fine, examples, or find, acts of harassment, be it physical, mental, virtual, technical, or psychological. So it's the manager's job to bring this up, in his meetings, in his, onboarding, procedures, or whatever he can. And of course, he would have to lead by example, as, it will all start out with him. But if he seems to be lenient, there might be forces that will try to bank on him or on the harassment part. And as an employer, it's your responsibility to investigate, take every complaint seriously, keep matters confidential. So you have seen the recent trends in even going back to many years ago. So the limitation has been widened. So they call it, the statutes that have, been given an expanded window, which means that they never will expire. So if even somebody were to accuse you or to harass you 10, 15 years ago, you can still bring it up, okay? So the statutes of limitations don't expire, when it comes to harassment. And this is an employer's responsibility to make sure that he brings it up. By just doing this, he's taking care of the problem, to a greater extent.
Henrietta and Boris had reported an employee dispute to Killian and were in the process of a heated argument when Killian stepped in to manage the situation. He conducted himself with professionalism and displayed the qualities a good leader should have by taking control of the situation and teaching Henrietta and Boris the tools they would need to negotiate and resolve the dispute between themselves. He recognized both Henrietta and Boris for their separate contributions and helped them resolve their conflict in a peaceful manner which didn't disrupt the rest of the staff. Henrietta and Boris left with their issue resolved and increased respect for each other and their manager, whilst Killian was happy he could resolve an issue which had the potential to decrease productivity.
All right, in this video, you saw one example where one dispute was very successfully resolved, very peacefully, okay? But that doesn't happen all the time. There are serial aggressors, okay? So anyway, this is everyone's responsibility, you as an employee and the employer himself. Workplace wellness, this is a very simple topic. How do you keep your employees healthy and fit, okay? You can use all the time management techniques, okay, and the stress management techniques that you have learned on, and give them an encouragement to have, a good, workout schedule. As you know, most organizations allow you to, spend time, go to the gym during the hours or after, and provide as many facilities as you can. But you always have to talk about healthy food, healthy diet, no matter where you are, whether it's your workplace or your home or in your social network. This is always to be emphasized, and physical, routines are always, important. Okay, you can see how HR has even incorporated, the serious, outbreaks like the flu. And you would also see in the manuals of HR how it even talks about pandemics and epidemics, okay? Because the flu outbreak was a serious, crisis back then. I think the last major flu outbreak was like 50 years ago, and we're in a phase now where we are ourselves witnessing it firsthand. So just as important, or just how as important, the physical and the health style and the diet and the healthcare issue is, the HR also signifies the importance of trying to not have a flu outbreak, okay? It's based on stress. Focus on health promotions, provide training and education. So this is to be spent.
Dean and Caitlin were the owners of a successful aerial photography business and had recently employed several new photographers and administrative staff members to help them achieve their goals. They traveled extensively in West Africa and were discussing their employees' wellness needs and whether the Ebola outbreak would prove a serious threat to their business. Caitlin suggested they create a plan for managing wellness should a pandemic occur, and Dean agreed. He included the need for managing stress and mental health in their employees and themselves. Together, they set up a plan for managing employee health and safety, and were happy they had this aspect of their business covered should worst come to worst at any point in the future.
All right, this video talks in specific about one outbreak known as Ebola. I don't know how many of you are familiar. It was just a great lesson that one could have learned from Ebola. But we never learned the lesson because this was only restricted to a few African countries, okay? So the pandemics have been clearly, mentioned and warned about. You may have seen the TED Talk by Bill Gates, how he seriously predicted, very accurately what we're going through now, okay? But that was not enough, okay? We didn't take it seriously. And we could have definitely avoided or at least been prepared for this. So this is once again HR, how responsible and how widened its role is. I think I'm gonna stop in a few minutes now. Maybe go one more topic and break for questions. And then we'll try to finish the rest of the topics, including the competency-based, including the motivational theories and whatever is the newer in the HR field tomorrow. All right, feedback is important. I have used the word ubiquitous. Feedback is ubiquitous. There has to be a feedback. Now, feedback is something that you have heard in the areas of HR only. But no, that's not true. Feedback is, is to be everywhere, is universal, is potent, and it's ubiquitous. So be sure to feedback. There is something by Bill Gates at the bottom. Life is not fair. Get used to it. So how do you feedback? There are different ways of giving a feedback. Okay, feedback models are time and place, formal, informal, 360 degree. This is employee, feedback, okay? But feedback has to be done on a daily basis between you and your colleagues, between you and your, boss, and so forth. In formal technique, you would have a 360 degree feedback, which is not to be delegated, as we learned. And there are ways of giving a feedback. But before I get to this slide, I just want to say that, you learn in stress management, what is the best way to evaluate yourself? What is the best way to evaluate yourself? I just talked about it. You have to ask other people, okay? And that's a feedback, okay? Like how I asked to please give you all a feedback is what you would do, not just a 360-degree feedback. It's known as a feedback sandwich, where you sugarcoat it with bread and cheese and ask a critical question. So when it comes to a feedback sandwich, talk about their good stuff and give a critic or a suggestion for their improvement in such a manner that they don't feel bad. And overall, it's a way to remember, calling it a feedback sandwich. Feedback is a learned skill. Observe and grow, and more likely to be followed. Feedback is actually a big topic, okay? And it has to be receptive, okay? And I'm forgetting there are 3 R's that relate to feedback. Reciprocating, receptive, feedback. So anyway, just for now, learn how to give a feedback and learn how to take a feedback. This is very important.
Yuri and Tosca were managers at a civil engineering company and were considering the best ways to give feedback and criticism to their employees without causing a dispute or lowering morale. Yuri suggested they use the feedback sandwich and explained that it was the perfect way to provide feedback and cushion criticism by making a specific positive comment, then offering critique or suggestions for improvement, and finally making an overall positive comment to cap off the sandwich. Tosca agreed that this seemed a positive way of approaching feedback on tasks completed, and the pair decided to implement it in the company. They were happy when their critiques were well received and worked on by the employees in question and could move on to managing new tasks.
All right, I'm going to stop here now for questions that you may have in general, a feedback, I would say, and how you all would like to move on tomorrow. We have a lot of topics to do. And of course, we only have so much time, being the last day, tomorrow being the last day of the session, which will resume after a break, later on. So I'm open for questions. And also if you could feedback as to what topic you would like for us to do tomorrow. Okay, I'm ready. Take over, Mr. Shehzad or Ms. Humaira.
Yes, Mr. Shah. Thank you very much, Mr. Shah, for such an insightful session today. I believe and hope everyone will be benefited from today's session. I will now move on to our Q&A session, and we'll be taking questions asked by our participants in Q&A section. So I can see that we have only 4 questions as of now. So the first one is, what is psychometric training?
It relates to asking questions to specific scenarios, okay? These are designed by psychiatrists, and it relates to actually capturing on your personality traits. talks about how you would communicate under stress. Okay, so these are scenario-based questions that would be asked that you would have to answer, based on which they will judge your capabilities in different scenarios. For example, what they cannot see is how emotional intelligent you are. So there would be questions relating to your emotional intelligence. And they cannot know what your social competencies are, okay? And that will be based out of a question. And they don't know in an interview how empathetic you are to your employees, emotional happenings, like in a situation where there is a death in the family of your colleague, how would you act? Are you too empathetic or are you not empathetic at all? Okay. And they would also try to figure out if you are a sociopath, if you would try to, bring in destruction emotionally and so forth. So these are very highly sophisticated interviewing techniques that most organizations are trying to adopt. It's a part of the competency-based HRM. Next.
Yes. Is artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, IoT, dominate the future of human resource technology?
Well, IoT is everywhere, okay? We know when there was this term called information superhighway back in the 90s, nobody thought that internet would take over. So Internet of Things is a very, general topic. It's not a very specialized topic. It's a very general topic. It could deal with very simple things as well as very, very, specialized areas. So if there is anything, if you're in HR, if there is anything newer in HR, and if you can't find anywhere, it would probably be somewhere available open source. And that's a part of IoT. It's a very general topic. Next question.
Yes. What is the difference between organizational capital and structural capital?
Organizational capital is the entire capital. It's related to an organizational advantage, which means that organizational capital could be the human capital and its resources, okay? Which means its product, a highly specialized product. It could be, the raw material that organization has, and it could be the resources that, are, developed as a part of continuous employee training, as a part of cross-functional or cross, departmental, experience that its executive have. And then structural training, are you relating to the physical structure? I don't understand the structural resource. Do you have that question? Can I have that question? Structural, are you relating to the physical structure? I don't know what a structural resource would be. If you're referring to the infrastructure, yes, of course, it's a big asset to have, an infrastructure, on which your organization can rely on. Okay, especially when it's facility based and it has, the features that you need, for a specific facility. So for a learning institution and a campus is important. For a manufacturing facility, it's infra is very important. I hope that answers. Next.
Yes. How does HR relates with the marketing and finance, as we see a lot of institutions providing dual courses with HR, either with or finance as their specialized course?
Well, see, HR now is to be incorporated in the organizational strategy, which means that it is supposed to have an overarching, a big strategy that will cover the entire HR department. So every HR department is supposed to interact with every different strategies at different levels. So marketing strategy, has to be a part of the HR strategy. So if the marketing wants certain individuals, okay, that has to be incorporated in their recruitment technique. Okay, if marketing is about paying a salary and commissions, or just paying commission for their positions, for improved sale, then HR would have to include that in their compensation plans, because compensation plans is a HR policy, and that is very vital to the organizational, structure and organizational architect structure and, the employee incentive programs and whatnot. So these are devised by HR, and these policies are, to be asked for by a specific department, whether it's marketing or finance. So all these policies at the unit level, at the functional level, the department level, has to be incorporated within the HR strategy. If employees would like to have a compensation plan, in a part of their salaries to be contributed towards retirement, and of course that would have to be taken care of by payroll, which is a part of HR. So it's all integrated these days. So that's why we need the right software to have all these departments integrated within HR. The HR software would have to be wide enough. So for an HR guy to invest is to invest in his software, which is the key. Next.
Somebody is asking the difference between recruitment and selection.
Okay, recruitment is the overall process where you would invite employees, okay? And then based on the pool of employees that you have, you would select them, okay? It's basically how you would narrow it down based on the assessments, based on the questionnaires, okay? And based on, the qualification that you have. So usually the selection processes is done based on, the pool of employees you have with the job description. So selection comes after, or within recruitment. Next.
What may be the new challenges to the HCM post-COVID-19 scenario?
Okay. HR challenges to the post-COVID-19 scenario. That's a tough one because I cannot predict things. But all you can see, the employment is high. What we can see, the employment numbers are up. Okay, so there would be, a lot of competition. And when the opening wise, we may not even have openings because the businesses have been distracted. The businesses have been, slowed. And a majority of businesses that believe in deficit spending, which means that which borrow and move ahead, are in big trouble. Okay, all I can tell you, the future is very tough. Okay, with the employers, and from an HR perspective, the only area that HR can highlight or can work things out is the ethical HR, that if possible, we'll talk about it tomorrow. So every HR department would have to be in a very, very ethically strong position. They have to work in a fair manner without being biased. They have to work without discriminating, employees. So the responsibility or the burden is on their shoulders. All right, next question.
Yes. What kind of terms can be used for feedback, especially when there is a negative feedback which does not have negative effects on the employee or employer, but boost them to work on it?
See, first of all, feedback is ubiquitous, which means that it has to always be there. It cannot be discouraged. And the feedback would have to be, critiquing in a constructive manner. Okay, so we have used an example of the feedback sandwich. Okay, if you were to give a feedback which you think is bad, then start with something positive, include the bad in a positive way, and end it with a positive manner. And if you receive a feedback which is negative, it's your own emotions that you have to bring into the play, and you would take it in a constructive manner, no matter how bad it is when you receive it, but work on it to fix it. And when you deliver a feedback, make sure it's positive in the front and positive in the back without missing on the message. Okay, it's most important that you give a feedback and take a feedback and do it the right way. All right, next one.
Yes. What is the scope of career in HR or job consultant for a person who is MBA and PGDN in marketing? What particular area one should focus on?
Okay, you're asking about prospects for a career in HR for an MBA and
PGDN.
okay,
Postgraduate diploma in, I think,
networking.
networking. Yes.
Okay, so that's a computer specialty. Okay, And HR, is like any other department now. In the past, it may not have so much respect because it was known as a very generalist area. But now, with the skills in HR, it's called industry-wise. It's like you know uh, commonly marketable in every industry. So if a person who has an HR career can go into any other industry, that's how they call it cross-functional and industry-wise. You can go in anywhere. So with an MBA in marketing, you can go anywhere. Okay, you can be an HR personnel, and you can also be a specialist within HR. But if your computer skills are good, you can just be a software professional within HR. I know the SAP module uh, for HR is very marketable. It's very much in demand. And if your programming skills are good, the programming language for HR is very distinct, very special. It's called ABAP for HR, Advanced Business Application Language Programming for HR. So, you're better off by being a functional or a technical guy in the HR, as long as you have understanding of the processes, and be at the back end, as a software consultant. But you'd have to learn those modules. All right, next one.
Yes. How to get into big corporates since they don't generally advertise job?
Well, it's very easy to get into big corporates, okay? And you can only do it by soft skills, okay? You have to, do research, find out the big corporations, run into their, areas where there may not be an opening, but write a prospect letter, write a very nice one-page letter to different departments and make it customized, specific to their area. So you talk about them and introduce yourself in such a manner, and try to be unconventional, non-conventional, not like the regular letters that we get. So nobody cares for the regular letters. And more important than your resume is your cover letter, okay? Be sure to have a cover letter. And then the resume comes next. In fact, it doesn't even come into the picture if you have a good cover letter. So talk about it. There are different ways that you can be creative. You have to do a lot of reading on the internet. There are a couple books. One book is known as Knock 'Em Dead. If you can write it down, Knock 'Em Dead. And then the other famous book from our times, even now, is What Color is Your Parachute? So you have to read these books and get a book on how to write cover letters, okay? And learn how to write cover letters and write letters, and they will invite you, and that's how you get it. So forget the conventional way of applying for a job posting in today's, as you call the post-COVID world, if and when that happens. And this is, the code. So use the soft skills to get your job, okay? Because soft skills will not only get you the job, especially the writing skills and your speaking skills, but also will keep you on the job. All right.
All right. So we will take 2 more questions and then we'll proceed towards the end of the session.
Okay.
Second last question is, for a betterment of a company or organization, is HR department must be incorporated?
Yeah, it's a must, okay? Once, an HR department recruits the right individual, the right candidate, then he goes on till his retirement. And that's the purpose of a long-term sustained management. So it's very important. HR is the one who will make an employee feel like he's at home, okay? HR is the one who can look out for the well-being of the employee. And HR is the only department that is supposed to be loyal to the employee more than the employer, okay? So that's a must. Done?
Okay. Yes. So is HR department limited to some kind of businesses only?
No. Well, if it's a one-man business, a sole proprietorship, or a small organization partnership, then the owners are the HR, okay? And the way they can handle their human resources is better than anybody else. But once the organization expands, then the HR will expand, will have to be bring in. But the HR employees, the personnel department would have to be very, very sensitive to the needs of the business. And HR is important in every organization. And it's important in organizations that don't even exist, in virtual organizations. So this is, the launching pad for any organization towards the world of functionalities. Okay. So.
Okay. Okay, so we have one
Done?
more question. We can, if we have 1 minute time, can we take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so suggest some websites and modules to take for a professional to make career in HR and job consultancy.
All right, if you're already working, you can go for the certification known as CIPD, whatever that means, personal development. There is one major certification from the UK and there is other certification from the US. The US, I don't remember, it's called something HR, but these two certifications are in it's like a 2 or 3 step process, but these are very, very promising. Once you get even halfway through, you're most likely to get a very good position within any organization in their HR department. And the other way of looking at it is to get these software certifications done in the HR. There are quite a few. One is PeopleSoft, the other one is by HR, and they have their authorized, recognized, training facilities that you can join. But I know it's also very readily available at very cheap prices. So if you can get used to learning just one module within HR, like say payroll, which is a major, this is, a world by itself. If you can just learn the HR module in a software, in the HR software application on the functional side, like SAP, that's more than enough for you to get a job. Okay. All right. I think we're done.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I hope everyone enjoyed the session. It was really a nice session overall. I personally like the retention part because the companies that I have worked for, we were facing a lot of issues in terms of retention in past.
Yes. Turnover.
But it was really helpful for today's session. So I thank you, Mr. Shah, for your wonderful session. And Mr. Saeed Bhai, you there?
Yes.
Would you like to talk for a couple of minutes before we end the session?
No, I think I don't have anything specific to talk about, but again, one more time, on the element side of it, okay, we have already given the link in the chat box. Okay, so I would again appeal that, let people register and then take the courses. And today's session and tomorrow's session combined, HRM will be uploading tomorrow.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you so much, both of you, for your valuable time and support. We'll see you again tomorrow, inshallah. All the participants, it was fantastic to have you all on board. Keep coming for these live sessions, and I'm sure with every session, everyone is taking something new and something good with them. So thank you for being part of AMP Employability and Soft Skill Program. We will inshallah see you all tomorrow. Also ask your friends and family members to join these sessions and benefit by improving their skills. Thank you so much. This is Shahzad signing off for you. Thank you.
Thank you.